Well, there it is, everybody. We've got the final episode, the finale of Better Call Saul last night. And I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed the satisfying way that this show came to a close. As frustrating as my experience has been off and on for the past couple of episodes, I had no doubts that they were going to be able to land the plane with how incredible they were able to do that with Breaking Bad. And so a lot of my expectations were met or exceeded with this episode. I will say, just to get this out of the way first, before I talk about the plethora of things in this episode that I really enjoyed, that I did not think that the finale changed my feelings on the last couple of episodes, the last 4 weeks of the Gene epilogue. I still think that there was a way to do that in a better way. I don't know if it was less time in that timeline, doing 2 or 3 episodes instead of 4. I don't know if it was maybe sprinkling some of the storyline of the 2 scheme episodes throughout the season as like flash forward cold opens or something. I don't know. Hindsight, of course, is 2020. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. But after spending a month in this epilogue storyline, I just feel like it was a very strange way to structure the end of this show. And having 2 entire episodes just focused on schemes, which essentially is just to yet again hammer home that Jimmy cannot help himself. He's always going to go to the schemes, which to me I felt was obvious by this point in the show. And to just show how he's going to get caught, I don't know if we needed 2 episodes to set that up. So with that being said, now let's talk about everything in this final episode titled Saul Gone. And I really love the way that this episode gave me what I wanted in a way that I didn't know I wanted it, if that makes any sense. Ever since the little mid-season break that we had, where Lalo killed Howard Hamlin, and then we had like a month or so break, I had a lot of people asking me, like, where do you think the show is going to end? What's your predictions? And one thing that I kept saying, basically all the way up until maybe the last 3 episodes, was that I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to go differently than they did with Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad, everything had to end in this dark note. Everything had to go the route that made sense for that story. And I said, I have a sneaking suspicion they might try to go a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more happy with the ending of Better Call Saul. I think he might find Kim in the Gene timeline. I think they might rekindle, they might resolve their issues and get back together. I think that might be where they go, just to subvert our expectations. And in a way we got that, but not in the way that I was describing, not in like the traditional happy ending way. We get it where Jimmy gets everything that he deserves. He gets his comeuppance, he finally owns up to everything, and he gets the fate that makes sense for his character, while at the same time resolving his issues with Kim, rekindling their, if nothing else, friendship, and on certain notes, still getting that happy ending, but it's Jimmy's happy ending. So I really love the way that, like I've said, even on the episodes here recently where I've been a little bit more critical, that I've never been in a point where I can tell the writers of this show or the showrunners of this show what would be the better thing to do or what they should do, because they always end up giving me something that I love in a way that I would not have gone there, in a way that I would not have connected the dots. And I love that about these writers. So episode starts off, you've got, Gene on the run after Carol Burnett called the police on him. You got the Goodfellas helicopter and everything like that following him. And I was surprised that he was caught immediately. Like, he's in the dumpster, he's gathering all his stuff, he's trying to memorize the little line to tell Robert Forster, and immediately he's caught. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize that he was going to get caught right away. I thought it was going to be a whole episode of him on the run at least. And no, they just get right into it. The whole episode is him being caught and trying one last time, one last ditch effort to pull that Saul Goodman magic to get his ass out of the fire. And I really liked the journey that they took Saul on in this episode, to where he's caught. He is he's in jail. He's kind of accepting the fact that he's got a real tough situation ahead of him. And then you get this scene where he has this maniacal laugh in his jail cell. And from then on, the rest of the episode is him just setting up all these dominoes to once again pull a Slip and Jimmy scheme to get out of a federal manhunt, a federal case. And he pulls it off like magic. He pulls it off. Every single thing that he sets out to do, He does. He calls the guy that used to be the prosecuting lawyer that he used to give shit to around the coffee machine, who's now a defense lawyer. He gets him to be his co-counsel defense. He sets up this whole thing with all of the prosecutors where they were going after life plus like 190 years. And he pulls all that slip and Jimmy magic and just negotiates his way and schemes his way to get it all the way down to a 7-year deal, which is astronomically ridiculous for the amount of crimes that this guy is being tried for. And I was shocked at how much I loved the cameo of Marie. It was kind of jarring when I first saw her. He's walking down the hallway in handcuffs, and then you look and it was a brunette, and I thought it was going to be Kim. And then it turns around and it was Marie, and I was like, why the fuck is Marie here? That's weird. And for a split second, I was starting to think again, like, is this going to be one of those, like, we just have to throw her in because, is it going to feel forced? And as soon as she sits down, I was like, oh, wow. Okay, this makes complete sense. So they're here. It's something that the show has never brought up or addressed, the fact that Saul is absolutely complicit in the murders of Hank Schrader and Steve Gomez from Breaking Bad. Something that the show has never once mentioned. And when they start talking about that, I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. That's right, he is going to have his ass to the fire for that, because they can't prosecute Walt, they can't prosecute Jesse. They're going to want somebody to burn for those two federal deaths, those DEA deaths. And when she sits down and annihilates him, and there was a moment in his eyes, great acting by Bob Odenkirk in this episode, among his best as far as like episode performances, where he gives this look of acknowledgement, of sadness, almost like he's hearing everything that she's saying, and he's like, fuck yeah, you're right, I am a piece of shit, I am responsible for all of that. And then immediately just goes the Saul route, and immediately just kind of sits back and is like, gives this speech about how he met Walter White, which is true, but he dramatizes it a little bit, and then just kind of frames it as if all of the events of Breaking Bad was him under duress and under fear, which we all know it wasn't. And I love the fact that they keep cutting back to Marie and cutting back to the lead prosecutor, and they're not believing a word that he's saying. And they're like, do you really expect a jury to believe that? And he goes, just one of them.
One. All I need is one.
And you realize, like, oh yeah, reasonable doubt. If you don't get everybody on your side, you're fucked. And that sinking realization on the prosecutor's face, like, this son of a bitch is going to do it again. He's going to get away with this. I loved all of that. Even though it's dark, even though it's fucked up, especially when you hear Marie pour her heart out and Saul just immediately, like, teases us as an audience, like, yeah, you're right. And then immediately just goes, yeah, but fuck it, I'm going to get out of it anyway. I thought that was awesome. And the way that they build all the way up to this moment of change in the character of Saul, to where he's achieved everything, even beyond everything you could imagine, as far as dwindling down this deal to something ridiculous, like an insult to the crimes and the people that he has hurt. And then he adds in just one little extra thing. He's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to bring me ice cream every single Friday. And in exchange for that, I'm going to tell you this. And they all start laughing. They're like, yeah, your ex-wife has already given us that. And then this realization that comes over his face that Kim was actually able to do the right thing. After that last phone call they had where he throws it back in her face where she says, you should turn yourself in. He's like, you should turn yourself in. Like, what you're not clean with this. What is this bullshit? What's this holier than thou shit? And the fact that he hears that she actually did it changes him on the inside in that moment. And again, just the face, the acting of just the face of Bob Odenkirk, where he has that realization, oh my gosh, she actually did it. She actually did what I have never been able to do, which is face what I have done. And from then on, I kind of had a hope of where the episode was going to go, and I was pleasantly surprised in the way that it got there, to where he eventually goes into court. And I love where they show him where he's in handcuffs, but he's dolled right back up as Saul Goodman. He's got that shiny ass suit and the fucked up tie, and it's just right back into character. Goes into court and starts to recite the exact same bullshit story that he gave the prosecutors and Marie, and gets to a point after he says, that's how I met Walter White, and then he changes it to where he starts to actually own everything.
Fact is, Walter White couldn't have done it without me. You got that?
He says, and that's pretty much where the fear stopped. And from then on, I helped him build this meth empire so that I could make millions because I saw the potential, and goes even as far as something that Walt would not like if he was still alive, to kind of take credit for a lot of what happened in Breaking Bad. And so like he would have been dead or locked up in a couple of weeks if it wasn't for me. I created Walter White. I created Heisenberg. I created this meth empire that has stormed the nation over the past 6 months. That was me. I was the thing that made it all work, which is something that I always knew. I think any of us that are big fans of Breaking Bad always knew that there's a lot of things that Walt and Jesse would never have been able to do if it wasn't for the help of Saul, but they're really trying to like reinforce that. I think for the tongue-tied. I think for the sake of being able to watch Better Call Saul and immediately go into Breaking Bad and have the show kind of reframed in a certain way, which I can say it absolutely was. Just refinished watching Breaking Bad a couple of weeks ago, and even without seeing these last 2 episodes, the show is very different when you watch scenes with Saul or Mike or Gus. So I love the fact that he finally owned everything, and in his same overly confident, smug Saul Goodman way, to where he's kind of like, he's fucking himself, but he's doing this to everybody in the courtroom except for Kim at the same time, including the guy that he got to represent him. I vow to remove myself from this case. No, sit down, bitch. That was hilarious. But I love the fact that he does that, knowing that he just burned his life to the ground. He just took every single thing that he just worked to whittle his way into this bullshit sentence and just burned it to the ground, and just turns around and looks at Kim the entire time with this face of, you're right, and now I'm doing it too. Like this realization of like, this is not the person that I want to be. I want to be Jimmy again. I want to be the guy that you fell in love with. I want to be that person that I always wanted Chuck to see. Even him acknowledging the fact that he caused Chuck's death, and they, the way that they're like, that's not even part of the case. And he's like, yeah, but it's a crime. It's absolutely a crime. I love that. I love that moment of reconciliation, that moment of realization, of self-awareness between those two characters. And finally having Saul just own everything that he's done. No more scheming, no more lying, no more slipping Jimmy. I did all of this, and now it's time to pay for it. Like, I just thought that was just a great, satisfying way to finally bring his character arc to a close, where you spend 6 years, 6 seasons, really hammering home the fact that this guy cannot help himself but to do the schemes, but to do the shortcuts, to cut the corners, to do it his own way, and now he finally faces it all. I've had a hell of a run. I've had a hell of a life. Now it's time to rest. It's time to put up the pause button on, and Slippin' Jimmy is no more. Thought that was awesome. Even to the point where he goes to jail, and I love the way that they edited this to make it look like we were back at Cinnabon. And on the way to jail and in jail, he's kind of like this real popular guy. He's like this celebrity where everybody thinks he's awesome. Everybody's chanting Better Call Saul. So he still kind of gets a little bit of the notoriety that he always had a taste for, even in prison. And the final scene between him, the 2 final scenes between him and Kim, I thought were perfect. To where he goes to his lawyer, and it's her. She's practicing law again, so you know that she's going to pursue the pro bono stuff that was always her calling. So she gets a great ending as a character. And then they just go back to reframing it as one of the early episodes, one of the early scenes between these characters where they're just sitting against the wall sharing a cigarette, just being friends, just, you know, talking about life or whatever. And they're doing the same thing now that he's in prison and she's back to being a lawyer. And that was just such a good way to like bookend their entire relationship, to where now they're not going to be a couple again, obviously, but now their friendship and their love for each other is now intact again, which is the ending that I wanted, just not in the way that I thought that I wanted it. And the final scene where she's walking out of prison, and it has that wide shot where it shows them separated by those gates, and he does that thing again where he just lets her know, like, yep, this is where I belong, and she moves on. It's I almost get teared up, like I almost get choked up talking about it. It was just so perfect, just as an emotional end to those 2 character arcs, and for this show, I thought that was great. Beyond that, I know I talked about the Marie scene, but I also really enjoyed the other 2 flashback scenes as well. where you got, first of all, the scene with Chuck, where right before he goes in to kind of acknowledge everything, where it shows before the timeline of the show where he just starts bringing the stuff to Chuck while he's, walled up inside of his house with no electricity, and they have kind of a classic Jimmy and Chuck conversation to where Jimmy is doing everything he can to help his brother, kind of out of obligation, also out of admiration for him. Chuck's not really all that perceptive, all that accepting of Jimmy's help. He's like, yeah, I can hire somebody. It's like his gentle way of saying, I don't want you here, but being too afraid to, I guess, be mean to his brother. And they have this little conversation where Jimmy's not really happy about the direction of his career, his life, and Chuck tells him, like, you can always stop. You can always stop. You can always change the trajectory. You can always make a change to go in a new path to where you want to be, which kind of is the end of this whole episode-long conversation that he has with Mike, eventually with Walt, that I'll talk about, and then here about time machines or regrets. And they close it off with Chuck grabbing the H.G. Wells book and going and sitting down. And I thought that was a really good, smart, well-written way to get Chuck one more time in the show, give a scene that makes sense, that doesn't really provide us any new information, but it just does it in such a good way to set up what's about to happen in the current timeline, the Gene timeline. Now, the scene with Walt, I really enjoyed because there was so many things to unpack in this scene. It goes back into that timeline in the Granite State episode, the penultimate episode of Breaking Bad, where they're in Robert Forster's basement waiting to be relocated. And it shows Walt in a way that was interesting to me because we didn't really get to see his mindset while he was down there, like immediately after his whole life has just been burnt to the ground, to where he's been caught, Hank has been killed, his wife and his son have now just disavowed him completely, the law is at his house, he just gave away his daughter, like his life is over with. And we didn't get to see a lot about his immediate change, his immediate reaction, his immediate personality after those events. And you get to see a little bit of that here where he kind of goes back to being that condescending chemistry teacher, to where he's just obsessing, almost like the Fly episode, about this little clicking in this water heater. And so he's like, oh, I can fix it. Why do all this? Like it has no bearing whatsoever on his life. He's got millions of dollars or $1 million or whatever in this barrel. He's getting ready to go off and be relocated. And he's obsessing about Robert Forster's basement water heater. And like, oh, we don't need to do that. We don't need to unplug it. I can just fix it myself. Going back to that Fly obsession where it's something so minute that doesn't matter, but he's just trying to grab a hold of control in some way. He's trying to find something that he can control. And so that was one layer of this scene that I really enjoyed, was showing that version of Walt again, where he's lost everything. He now has lost control of everything in his life. And now he's trying to reclaim it just one little piece at a time with this water heater. Then I really enjoyed the whole thing about him talking about regrets with Saul, to where he once again brings up this time machine thing about, like, what would you do? Where would you go? What would you change? And Walt, in his very kind of condescending way, eventually leads to what we figure he would probably talk about, which is the whole thing regarding gray matter. I had this company that I started up with these people that I was friends with in college. I eventually walked away. They turned into this gigantic, multi-billionaire, huge corporation, and I'm here doing this shit. I'm in the basement. And there was something about it that I enjoyed that was, it teased for a moment like that maybe we were going to get another detail about this, because we still have never really been told the full details of what happened between Walt, Gretchen, and Elliot. It's been hinted at, it's been suggested. Obviously, he had a relationship with Gretchen, so I don't know if she started to have a liking for Elliot. I don't know if something happened to where just Walt's personality of all of his character flaws came out, and then he just fucking stormed out and they just went on and they're completely innocent, or are they complete assholes and they scheme to get him out of the company like he always phrases it? We never really know, and obviously now we never really will know, and I kind of like that we never quite know.
I thought I was doing the gentlemanly thing, but little did I understand that they were artfully maneuvering me into leaving my own creation.
But it teases for a moment that we might get some extra detail with that, or he might finally give another extra nugget of that story from his perspective, but he doesn't. He just phrases it the same way that he's always done, where he's like, this, I had all these discoveries, we were trying to monetize it, and then unbeknownst to me, they were scheming to get me out of my own company. He's always the victim. So that was cool, seeing that once again, that story has never changed for that character. And I like the fact that he kind of shut Saul down. He's like, look, you're not asking about time machines, you're asking about regrets. Just ask about regrets. That was a really great line. That's a total Walter White line. But the other layer of this scene that I really enjoyed was that it reinforces how much people just don't really see Jimmy's potential. And that was kind of the inciting incident with Chuck in the first season of this show, is that Jimmy's trying his best to go on the straightened path in his own way. He's trying to be a lawyer. He wants to stand next to his brother as a prestigious, respected lawyer, but he just wants to go about it his own way. And all throughout the show, with the exception of maybe Kim, everybody always doubts him. Everybody always looks down on him. Everybody always doesn't see any potential there. They just see Slippin' Jimmy. And Walt very much was the same way in Breaking Bad, where he was always talking down to Saul. He was always threatening Saul, looming over him. We're done when I say we're done. And you get to this scene, and even though they've lost everything, both of them, and they're just having this human conversation, even in that moment, Walt can't help but to look down on Jimmy.
So you were always like this?
And to treat him as like this cockroach, which he kind of earns, but at the same time, it's also just that whole tragedy of the show that's just brought up once again in this Breaking Bad scene, where they're talking about regrets, and Walt has this regret that would just literally change his entire life. Like this inciting incident that in a very inadvertent way has led to the horrors that he has done in the 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, and caused this extremely bitter, ego-driven, resentful person that he becomes. And you have Saul, to where there's obviously things in his life that are the same thing, at least one or two, to where he can go back and change that one thing and be this better person, have this better life, not hurt all these people that he has hurt. And he chooses to talk about this slip that he messed up one time, this con that he didn't quite execute the best way and hurt his knee. That's the one thing that he would go back and change, which again is reinforcing the whole thing about like Jimmy just can't help himself. Like he's just he can't be self-aware in what he has done. He can't see that he had this path, and he can't embrace the fact that he could have been a different person. He always has to focus on, well, I could have done this scheme better. I could have got a little bit more money here. It's always about this game with him. And so it reinforces that, and then caps it all off with Walter looking at him and goes, you would go back and change a con? And he's like, yeah, I messed up my knee. And he just looks at him and goes, so you've always been this way. And then goes back and starts focusing on the water heater again, and Saul just kind of sits there. Just such a brilliant scene. And that's what I wanted with the Breaking Bad episode flashback. And again, like in hindsight, it's much more rewarding to watch it and then go back. But that scene to me just felt like fan service for the sake of it, where these scenes really feel like they have a purpose in the story and for the character arcs, and are just really, really integral in the way that they're written into these episodes. So overall, I pretty much loved everything about this finale. I think it ended the show on a very satisfying note. It wasn't good enough, or it wasn't something that was so powerful that it reframed some of my issues with the previous 3 episodes, mostly the 2 before the last 2 episodes, the scheming episodes with Jeff. But it still ends the show on a very satisfying note, which is a huge breath of relief. Whenever you love a show, whenever you're invested in a show, the odds are not in your favor with the show landing the plane in a satisfying way. Much more often shows fail at the end, and you always have to talk about, oh, that show's great, but the way that it ended, hello, Dexter. So I'm glad the fact that it ends on a note where I'm like, that was perfect. That was a perfect end for those characters, for that story, for a lot of the themes and a lot of the things they've been exploring for 6 years. As a final season, I'm debating I might just do a review talking about the season as a whole. As a whole, the season is not one of my favorites of Better Call Saul at all. But the way, the overall ending, the last episode, I would say is perfect. I think it's a damn near perfect finale. We had a little bit of a rough road to get to that point, but it's damn near a perfect finale. So overall, guys, what are your thoughts on this show? What are your thoughts on this finale? Did you get everything that you wanted? Was there something that you did not get? Did you dislike this? And I'm debating on doing some rankings and everything to where I'm going to rank the seasons of Better Call Saul. I might do a video where I rank the Better Call Saul seasons and the Breaking Bad seasons in one video. And I want to do some kind of a video on the characters, either a tier list or a ranking. So let me know if you're excited for those, if you're interested in those, or if there's some other idea you want me to do. I love talking about this universe, so be sure to let me know what you think about the finale of Better Call Saul. Well, that's it for me, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for my playlist of all of my Better Call Saul reviews, and I'm going to put my ranking of the Breaking Bad seasons up here. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.